Hi everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and welcome to night 6, or the bonus video from the 2022 Spring Mini Skein mini-series. Tonight we are going to be dyeing 100 gram full skeins of yarn and some double-stranded sock blanks, still sticking with our theme of painting rainbows. Tonight we're going to go back to our neon fluorescent palette to create some rainbow colorways with a twist. And when I say with a twist, I mean that a little bit literally, because we're going to be playing with a few yarn bases that have fun twist elements in them to begin with. Here we have Wool to Die For's Shimmer Fingering, which is 90% superwash merino, 10% lurex. And then we have Sheila's Gold Zebra, which is 80% superwash merino, 20% nylon. And I've played with this zebra fingering yarn a lot. I have even dyed immersion neon colors on a non-superwash version of it in the past. This is a bouncy 2-ply yarn where one of the plies is variegated white, black, and a little bit of gray as it is spun. And so it's gonna add that graphic element to whatever we add on top. And that is our twist. But actually, I'm not quite done yet. There are a few versions of the zebra yarn. Here I have the Sheila's Gold, which, as I said, was 80% superwash merino, 20% nylon. We have a DK weight version that is 100% superwash merino that isn't quite as high twist. It's a bit loftier. Here the twists are applied like with a lot of like bounce. This is loftier, less bouncy, but has the same kind of element to it. And then I figured we may as well bring in a non-superwash option. This is the zebra fingering you have seen me play with the most. It is 100% Peruvian Highland wool. And the twist here is a lot more similar to the DK. The spin is a bit loftier, and you can really tell a little bit about the spin and that twist just by looking at the pattern of the black and white sort of barber pole that we have, because you can see that the spacing is more on this fingering weight yarn than it is over here. And not to leave out the shimmer fingering that I love, the lurex is one whole ply on this yarn and it doesn't take up color, so we will have some barber pole feeling if the silver contrasts with the other colors that we put onto the yarn as we dye it up. And as for the colorway, I want to do neon rainbow random placement yarn mop kind of style where I put the dye on my fingertips and apply it to the yarn. I think that I want to do it in 2 layers. So I want to do a layer of the color and then steam set a little bit and then do another layer of the color, because I've really liked how that has turned out in the past, and I think that that will work really nicely, especially on the non-superwash option. And I know people have really been wanting me to do something Lisa Frank feeling with black and neons, and so while this may not be exactly what people expected, you know how much I love the zebra base and how I so frequently pull it out into a dye-along where I want pops of black, because it's just so fun in there already. And I really want to do my neon rainbow yarn mop kind of style on it. And to add another element of fun, I thought that while we started our first round of mopping, we could also dye some neon rainbow sock blanks. These are Knit Picks Hawthrone fingering weight blanks. They are 80% superwash fine Highland wool, 20% polyamide, and they're double-stranded blanks, which can be then unraveled into 2 50-gram skeins of yarn, so you can make identical matched socks. And I really wanted to play with this as well, because in the process, this will give me an opportunity to talk more about sock blanks versus mini skein sets, and when you may want to use one versus the other to create a gradient style project. I'm pre-soaking the sock blanks in some plain tap water because we'll add acid to the immersion bath. And I'm gonna have 16 cups of water with 6 tablespoons of white vinegar for the rest of our yarn here. Normally, I don't measure out the volume of water that I use for a pre-soak like this, but since we will be dyeing up more, and I may have to say, oh, I wish I had more acid or less acid, and I actually already had water measured out, I figured that we may as well start with that here. I'm gonna pre-soak everything for at least 30 minutes. Since I don't mind if we have white left behind, it is perfectly fine to do a shorter soak. But for these prototypes, let's do a full 30 minutes. Here is our collection of neon/fluorescent acid dyes from Dharma Trading Company that you all know I love. Fluorescent Fuschia, Fluorescent Safety Orange, Fluorescent Lemon, Radioactive, Frozen Blue, and Purple Pop. I could substitute Carribean Blue. Ooh, should I do that? You know what? Let's do it. I truly hope I don't regret this, but Caribbean Blue is mega pigmented, less is more kind of situation, similar to these other hues. And so yeah, let's see what we think about it, because this whole series I've been talking about subbing it in. So we're gonna try it, and maybe I'll regret it and swap after this prototype phase, but we're gonna go for it. Now, since we're gonna be playing with dry dye powders, I will be wearing a respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves while we are dyeing all of the yarn. And we're gonna also be using an electric hot plate that I have not used in a while for the sock blanks. Mainly because I want to try to do everything in one frame, the blanks and the yarn mops, and just have everything here. Because often when I do a yarn mop with something on the stove, I have the yarn mop on the counter and I wouldn't be able to have the camera in both places. I'd have to set up a second camera, and this seems less complicated, and I mean, I haven't used this in a very long time, so why not use it? I know I've used this outside with my kettles. I don't know if I've used this with my catering steam pan. So we're gonna give it a shot and cross our fingers. The Hawthrone sock blanks are actually on a goodbye clearance. Actually, I don't need to wring out the water. They're on a goodbye clearance at Knit Picks, which means that soon they will not exist on there anymore, which is too bad because I like the Hawthorne yarn base a lot. It's higher twist than Stroll, but I like the Hawthorne blanks a lot, which is why I'm using them. The Stroll blanks hold together slightly better, but the Hawthorne ones still work really nicely, and I love the way the yarn in the end looks on the Hawthorne blanks. But again, I don't know how many different blanks I'm going to do. Wool to Dye For now has some single-stranded blanks with a silk blend that is pretty exciting, and so that's something else that I could potentially play with, but maybe not as part of this series. So I think we'll fit 300 grams of blanks in here. The way that the fabric is in the pan is going to provide some amount of resist and affect the way that the colors spread and bind and move. And I don't know how many layers we're gonna want to do of color on here, but yeah, we'll see. And I'm planning to do roughly rainbow placement, but it's not gonna be straight lines. There will be variegated patches in here. Now, the hot plate is not turned on yet because, well, we're not ready to go. And let's think. I would say that there's probably, knowing that 16 cups of water goes up to about here, I'm now going to reuse our pre-soak water, and let's add 2, 3, 4 tablespoons of white vinegar to it, just to have. And then I'm gonna take this and pour enough on. We want there to be water at the corners and stuff, but I want most of our yarn to be at or above the surface. But I do want a little bit of spread because that'll look nice. So add just a tiny bit of more. I'm gonna set this aside so I can add more if required. But this is pretty good. And so now I'm gonna turn this on to start heating it up. And goodness, which burner is bigger? Okay, the one closer to me is bigger. I'm gonna put it on high at first and keep an eye on it because then we can reduce the heat. I have our 4 prototypes here. I've got the superwash all over here and the non-superwash and sparkle there. And normally doing a project like this would have enough dye for like 1 yarn mop, not 4. So I will be going into the dye containers more often than I might otherwise do when dyeing something like this. But I mean, I have all these ideas and all these things I want to play with, so I thought it would be fun to try this out. Okay, and the good news is I definitely feel heat here. There is some heat in that other burner as well. So I'm gonna reduce the heat on the big one because I'm starting to see some bubbles because we're not quite there yet with the little one, which I still have on hotter. But it's good to know that this is actually heating up a small volume of water pretty quickly because it definitely did not with a large kettle with a lot of water. But I mean, that does also make sense. But anyway, I'm gonna keep an eye on this and see about how long it takes, but we can help. Actually, let's rotate it. Like if one side has more heat than the other, to start with, we may as well swap it while we can to distribute the heat a little better and cross our fingers. I'm gonna cross my fingers on this. But I like this setup, this is fun. And if this is working well, then I should be using it more. So anyway, I'm gonna go get everything else I need ready to go. Okay, let's start with the purple pop today. And I'm gonna come over here with the straight dye powder and speckle some of it onto our blank. Of course, it doesn't end up with very much dye on my fingertips. I even like went in again, and so if I just took this and wiped on, like that's some amount of color. Normally if I was dyeing this much yarn, I would only have 1 yarn mop. I wouldn't necessarily have 4. So what I'm going to be doing is drying my fingers and going back in to coat my fingers with some more dye to wipe it off. And I can already tell I'm going to want to go in multiple times. And I think if I was going to scale this up so I would not need to dry my fingertips, I would take some of the dye and put it in a separate container so that way the dye could get a little bit wet and then that would not bother me. So yeah, I mean, I may want to do 2 rounds. I may want to do 2 rounds of color before steam setting and then do a little bit more on these mops, but we'll see what our coverage is. Actually, that's looking really nice and purple. Now the one yarn where this may not work quite as well is our non-superwash yarn, which used a non-superwash yarn as a yarn mop once, I believe. Yeah, I think only once. And it doesn't do a good job at soaking up the dye, but the colors were really pretty. So I probably will do another round of each of these colors, but we'll go ahead and dye the blank and then consider what we need here. Okay, we've got the Carribean Blue, which is a color I am not as familiar with, but I believe should still give us neon-y feeling blue. But the Frozen is a pre-mixed pastel, so this could be too dark. But Frozen sometimes doesn't have quite enough of like a punch or spread because it strikes a little bit too fast. So we're going to give this a shot. But the nice thing is that this color should go much further. Yeah, this is going way, way further here on the yarn mop portion. You can see how far it is spreading with my gloved fingertips. So that is good.
And this cotton bandana that I'm using, I just wash and like I'll rinse it out, all the dye out, and then do a load of laundry of it at some point. So, all right, for yarn mop purposes, as long as this color sets well and doesn't bleed, it's doing okay for this stage. It coats my gloves pretty well. The reason for trying to dry my fingertips before going back in to the container is that I do not want to introduce moisture into those containers, because then the dye can like clump and kind of go bad a little bit. But all right, this blue is going nice and far. It also seems like it's spreading out a fair amount over on our blank. But I like this overall technique of applying color to yarn, and you can see I'm really randomly, like literally trying to just wipe the color off of my gloves to get it on the yarn, and it just creates something so random that I really like. You know, I don't know the pigments in Frozen. It could be the same pigment that's in Caribbean Blue. So since I don't know, I don't want to like judge it too much. I'm probably going to reduce the heat over here a little bit more because it's a little bit steamy. I'm layering the green on the blue a little bit just because I think that that is fun to do. Okay, I'm reducing that a little bit, and let's start. I've been starting in the same order, but let's start over here. I'm getting more blue back on my gloves, but the non-superwash wool, absolutely, just the colors won't strike nearly as fast, and some, not necessarily fluorescent colors, but some colors will start striking to superwash wool pretty quickly. Another fun thing about doing this kind of random pattern is that even doing some at the same time, even if these were all for the exact same base, there would be differences. Like one could feel more green, one could feel more pink, things like that. And that blue is absolutely moving around. We may not do a short set in between. Oh, I still have to do these ones. We may do a full, oh, this is so pretty. We may do a full like 30-minute steam in the middle to help layer the color. And so, yeah, the goal is to look for white areas, and that's where we want the dye to go. But this is good to know about the blue and how that is handling. Sheila's Gold is not a base I have played with a lot, but I believe there's also just like a superwash merino fingering version of the zebra yarn. But when I got the gold one, like, it's really nice, and I really like it. So I am excited by that. Okay, I think I'm gonna mix things up a little bit now. I'm gonna go in with the Fluorescent Fuschia. I wanna do the lemon last on the blank because that is a color that has the potential to be overtaken by like the orange and the green. So I want to make sure that as these other colors spread out a bit, that I'm saving enough space for it. And I know that like I'm sort of speckling this dye on. It doesn't end up looking very speckled like on the blank, but there will be speckles in how it comes out in the end, just based on where the colors are placed and when you unravel it and see those colors beneath the surface. So yeah, streamlining this when I can allow my fingertips to be a little bit more damp when going into the dye will be nice. Looking for, and this is what I do when I have a yarn mop off camera, is I look for areas that have more white space still to add the dye. And actually, I'm glad I have the yarn two to a pan, because I think if I had one in the pan, I would be focusing on the individual placement a little bit more than I am, because since it's a little bit more crowded on the pan. Oh dear. Oh no. That was a lot more pink. So I'm going to go straight here. I accidentally had some powder on the tip of my fingertip that landed there. So that'll give us a good amount of pink there. Let's see. I'm going to spread that even more, but that's going to be a nice deep pink patch that we've got there. It's really pretty. Got our pink, and so now we'll do the orange. Yeah, so I guarantee that the finished soft blank yarn is not going to be as saturated as it's looking, because again, this is 3 blanks. If it was 1 blank, maybe. Fluorescent Safety Orange is a super, super fun color. I really, really like it. I'm not going very far with it. I am overlapping some of it with the pink because, again, I'm going a bit lighter up there. I'm trying to leave some space for our yellow because I want there to be space for it. So I will say the non-superwash one may not need very much more color, because I was like, oh, I want to do 2 layers and I may want some more color on it and to just plan the placement of that a little bit better. But it's looking like it's got reasonable coverage. Oh, I haven't done the yellow yet. I was like, oh, I should go take it and just put it straight in the steamer basket. But we forgot about yellow. Fluorescent Lemon is like the most gorgeous highlighter yellow color, and I really, well, I love all of these. I'm getting more coverage than I expected on those 2. Over here, I feel like I probably will want more color, but I think that each one will have to be like sort of taken on its own and played by ear a little bit just to see where we want more coverage. But remember how I thought I was going to need to do multiple dips in each one when I started with that purple pop? Maybe not. Yeah, but I'm glad that I started this way. But yeah, we'll see. Like certain blends, the colors like spread more. And so we'll see what we need. Remember, like in Hanukkah, I did a double process, but we were starting with minis. And so that was also a little bit different from the very beginning. Okay, now we can do our lemon. I really like having everything on the counter. And I'm really happy that I tried like speckling so much with our lemon this year, because that turned out so fun on that speckly colorway. All right, we'll see how that looks and if I'll want to add more. That's another thing I've sort of felt with fluorescent lemon, is that sometimes I want it to go a little bit further. And by that I mean I need to use more of it than the other colors. Looking for big white patches, sort of have ready at the surface for when we bring in the color. But yeah, you see when I put the pop of that yellow on, I'm not sure how well you can see on camera, but yellow at the very beginning, if it's like concentrated, will look a little bit orange. And so that's why it's hard to get like a super, super saturated yellow that still feels yellow. Yeah, I would say on this one, and sometimes with my mops I move the zip tie down, I feel like I'm not getting as much color on the DK Superwash, which could be because of how I am doing it, or it could be something about the yarn and just the dye soaking it a little bit faster. We are getting color on my rag though, but this 80-20 is just like a dream to wipe my gloved hands on. I'm really, really liking it. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and steam all of this yarn for, well, I'm gonna put a cap on this dye. I'm gonna steam all of this yarn for 40 minutes, just to give plenty of time. And as I put the yarn in, if I saw some dye, you know, in the pan, I tried to wipe it up a bit. I mean, I know it's gonna spread some, but I will go ahead and rinse these because I don't have a mop for my mops. And the rag is ready to be washed. I don't think I'd be able to use it for a second round. But I did want to come and just check the edges, and there's very, very little color in those edges. I always wipe my floor. You can see on my work surface protected, just to check for color. But yeah, so there's a little bit of color like on the surface around there, and I'll wipe that down before I take my mask off. But I'm gonna go rinse this as I try to rinse the dye out before putting it through the wash. And I guess I'll be back in about 40 minutes, and I'll keep an eye on the water level in here. Although actually, I think I changed my mind. I think I'm gonna turn off this hot plate. I think it worked really well for adding the dye, but I think I wanna go put this on my stove to set over there because I have a little bit more control over the heat. And I don't believe I'm gonna add any more color here. I'm satisfied with the color. And so the edges aren't hot. I'm just worried that the edges aren't getting enough heat. And so this will help me control that a lot better. But I can say, oh, turn it off. I will be using this a lot more in the future. And it's gonna take a long time for it to cool.
I really enjoy dyeing up a colorway where everything is unique. So all 4 skeins are in this steamer basket. And there's about like a couple inches of water in the bottom, and so that's where they are steam setting. It's been 40 minutes. I'm gonna turn off the heat, even if we may add more color and need more heat. This was extra steamy today and so that took a moment. But I am going to set the yarn aside. That is a lot of glue there. To cool for a bit so then we can decide what, ooh, that's so pretty on there, what we need to happen for our next layer. Yeah, there's some colors where we went higher, and so not very like pastel moppy, but we've got some brights in here. Okay, I am seeing, see that? Some pink come out there. Uh-oh. So let's set this aside, and we're gonna peek. Okay, maybe it was just that one little spot of pink. But I've popped a cooling off yarn in my sink, and I do want to just take a paper towel and just see. This is a different steam pan. Okay, I'm seeing actually some pops of yellow dye that look like they're not quite dissolved in there. So that's something that is important to keep in mind. There could have been some dye that just didn't soak into the liquid. But I'm gonna let all of this cool for a while, and then we'll take a look at the colors on the counter and decide how we want to proceed. Okay, here are the yarn mops, and they're pretty, but I think that it's less like what I was thinking about in my head, mainly because I think there's more contrast between the colors and the white, and things aren't feeling as neon as they are saturated. And that is probably because I was working here with the straight dye powders versus dyes mixed with citric acid. Now, I don't know how citric acid would work on our Lurex blend. I haven't tried that before, but I am willing to try that out in a subsequent layer. But I think that if I'm gonna have colors that are this saturated, I might prefer to do something immersion like I did with the sock blanks, but on the yarn, to have something more repeating. Because I think that that would highlight and like not compete with some of this black in here quite as much. And I'm debating about adding a little bit more color now or leaving it as is. I put my rubber respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves back on to do a little bit more color, a little bit more purple pop, and a little bit more green, just to sort of round things out a little bit more. But overall, I am very happy with the coverage. It's just I feel like those two colors were missing a little bit. Once I added the color, I put the yarn back in the steamer basket to steam set for 40 minutes and then let the yarn cool completely so we can wash it. Let's wash this first round of yarn mops, which, don't get me wrong, they are really, really cool, and there are elements here that I really, really like. It just wasn't quite what I had in my head, which is why I decided to shift gears, which I will probably show shortly after this. But I still think these colorways are really cool, and I'm excited to see them dry. Now, I am seeing a little bit of some color come out. There is a chance that there was some like undissolved powder or something somewhere on here in a way that maybe we did not see with our blanks, which had no bleeding. So I'm going to add some dish soap and just fill the pan up with water to let things soak a bit. Because don't forget, this has not been submerged at all yet. This is the first time we have submerged these skeins in liquid since we dyed them. All right, let's see how we're doing. Oh, that's already better. I think there was just like a little bit of something that needed to be rinsed out, but we will see. I need to remember that I have a non-superwash yarn. Okay, I'm still seeing a hint of some color, but for the amount of color we have here, that's not bad. And you know, the black is popping more. So we'll see. I might be going back and forth between what it is I want to do. I'm gonna rinse this a few more times until the water runs clear. If it doesn't run clear, I'll pop back in, but I'm anticipating it'll be clear. I'll let things soak for a bit after I fill this up. And then I'm gonna hang them up to dry so you can come back and take a look at these compared with the other types of prototypes I've dyed up. I'm a little nervous I have too much dye, but I'm glad that I moved this over here because it allows me to, you know, every once in a while I can raise the heat like I am in this back section just to make sure it is nice and hot before reducing it back to low. I really like the way that the colors are blending, how we see so many different greens and purples and blues in there. It is so, so pretty. So with the gas stove, I have more control to heat and reduce the heat on the yarn, and so I can change that more in real time than I can with the electric hot plate. But I think I will do another video sometime soon, dyeing on the steam pan just on the hot plate. But for today, you know, I was able to do it side by side, and that was really, really fun. And as for our neon rainbow, I have come and added water once just to make sure it didn't get too low, and also to rinse off the sides because I saw a little bit of dye potentially stuck. And I also tried, if I saw patches where it looked like some things could use a little more liquid, I tried to also give that a little bit of attention in here. And so now I'm just adding more of that water that we originally added vinegar to. I'm gonna check and see how we're doing. All right, I see a hint of some pink, tiny hint of some yellow. I'm now moving the yarn more. How are we doing with the blue? The blue is gonna make me nervous. Okay, we've got a little bit of pink down there, but like a little bit of blue. Some of this has potentially cleared. So overall, that's not bad. That is a good overall sign. But I am going to slowly add more water with vinegar just to make sure over some of these areas, just to make sure that if there was some blue that didn't strike because maybe it didn't have enough liquid to fully dissolve, let's just try to give it that little bit of chance. But I don't want to add too much liquid because I don't want things to spread too much. The good news is everything left that I've seen is pretty pastel. And I know that water had acid mixed in, but let's add some more vinegar over some of these areas where we are a little bit more concerned, because it's not going to hurt anything to have more acid. And I'm going to go ahead and let this heat for another 30 minutes just to be safe, but then I'll turn off the heat and let things cool completely here in the pan. And as for the hot plate, it is still pretty warm, and this is after it's been off for over 40 minutes. And so that is just something that you want to keep in mind when using a hot plate, that you won't be able to move it and put it away for a while. Not that that's a bad thing, it's just worth keeping that in mind. I'm turning off the heat here, and I'm curious to see. I feel like it's pretty good with the colors being nice and set, everything being nice and wet. I think some of that residual color before could have been, if there was just like a little too much powder in a spot, which there could still be something we need to rinse out, but adding liquid on top would help things dissolve if it needed it. But anyway, we're gonna let this cool. I'm ready to go wash these blanks, but here I just have some plain water. And let's just take it out. Ooh, and see the coverage. Whoa! We got way more coverage than I expected. Oh, this is so cool. Wow, there's like not really any white because all those colors spread so much. I mean, there might still be some speckling from the resist because that's what happens with blanks. But wow, I'm really happy with this, and I'm happy with not seeing any color in here either. This is really cool. You can see things aren't like a straight line, so it'll be variegated as it goes, but I'm really liking these blanks and thinking of like a different direction that I might be going with our main colorway. I guess I did add more acid in here, so otherwise I would reuse this. But anyway, let's go wash these blanks officially. Okay, let's wash these blanks, and I am so excited. These are so neon, they are beautiful, and we didn't press down to spread out the color. The color where we're gonna have the most speckly is definitely that purple pop because it has the pink spread. Let's add just a tiny bit of some plain dish soap, some clear dish soap. Ooh. And we're gonna see. But I mean, that's not bad. I'm gonna fill this up all the way and leave the blanks in here to soak for a minute to see if we're gonna see any bleeding. All right, it's been a couple minutes and I was going back and looking at clips to write down the conditions used. And let's remove the yarn. I mean, that's looking perfectly clear. I think adding more liquid and giving it more time was perfect. This is incredible. Not like as speckly as I was expecting, but I think that, gosh, I've done blanks with these colors, but mixed with citric acid. And so then we got more speckly. There wasn't as much color to spread, but this worked so good. I'm rethinking my entire plan. So I'm gonna finish rinsing out the soap from these blanks. I'm gonna put them through my spin dryer, hang them up to dry, and we're gonna do another prototype. I put on my respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves to dye another colorway with a more repeating variegated rainbow versus the random yarn mop approach I went through before. I added 3 tablespoons of white vinegar to 8 cups of water and added enough of that mixture to my catering steam pan, which had our 2 superwash zebra bases and the Lurex blend. I wanted enough water there to have some yarn at the surface, but to have enough liquid to help me spread the colors through the area a bit. Because one main difference here is that after I applied like a light layer of color onto the yarn and wiped my hands on a yarn mop that I'll talk more about in a moment, I used my spoon to spread the dyes through more layers of yarn. These neon colors will spread some amount on their own, but again, since we've got more layers here than just we did with the sock blanks, I wanted to help some of that spread happen a little bit more. And as for the yarn mop, it's a skein of the non-superwash zebra fingering that I pre-soaked in the same water with vinegar that we had used originally in this video. Once I had added all of the color onto the first side of the yarn, I popped the yarn mop into my steamer basket and let the yarn sit here in the pan for, I think, 20 minutes. In the time lapse, you've seen me check in a couple of times. All right, we still definitely have some
pinks down there. I checked in a few times to add some more water. I'm still seeing a fair amount of color. And so I don't exactly want to flip yet. I'm gonna move, and yeah, we have a fair amount of color. I wonder how far down these are going. I'm gonna peek in. It's going pretty far. I mean, part of me is like, I will want to add color to the other side, but it might not be a lot of color that's needed, probably even less than what we did here. I mean, I am seeing some like whites in there, and so it definitely is not all as saturated as we got with, say, the blanks. But I think that, goodness, what I should do is I'm gonna give this another 20 minutes, so 40 minutes total, keeping an eye on it and adding more water as I think could be needed. Okay, we're still on the electric burners, but I think I might move this to the gas because I realized I don't think it's really that warm, which could be why the colors haven't struck yet. We are seeing some steam, but it's possible we're not getting as much coverage of heat towards the outside, because if I feel the sides of the pan, that feels really cool. So I'm gonna take this over to the gas stove, turning off and unplugging the electric burners. And I'll add some more water. There's 13 minutes left on the 20-minute timer that I started. That is worth keeping in mind. But already, just like after a moment, things are already a lot steamier. I suppose what I could do, and I should probably do, if I am using the electric burner, is I should cover the yarn so that way we're not losing heat. And that's a way to keep the heat in without having things be too hot in any one spot. But anyway, it's gonna take me some time to figure out how to use that burner again. So I'll come back when the timer goes off. Okay, there is a lot of color, and so I don't want to flip the yarn because I don't want to muddy anything yet. And I mean, there's a lot of color. I think what I need to do is turn off the heat and let things cool. I don't think I added too much dye. Ironically, the blue has done pretty well. I just think that things are gonna need to cool and just need like a little bit of extended time. But see, there are white sections and stuff that I'm probably gonna want more color. So I'm also, like, I just washed the yarn mops, even though I showed that earlier, and I'm liking those a lot more, seeing them come out with like some of the water out, so the colors are a little bit less saturated. So I'm all over the place. I'm gonna let this cool for, I think, about an hour, and then we'll see how we're doing. The heat is off. But we'll see if that color has absorbed yet, if we need to wait a little longer, and then I can come back tonight and add more color. Okay, our yarn has cooled for an hour, and I'm not pressing with a sock, but what I'm gonna do is flip it like this. Okay, so that way I'm flipping the yarn, but not really giving things space to necessarily spread out. So it looks like the pink spread itself pretty well. The colors where we need a little bit more are the purple, the blue, and the green. I guess everything not the pink. Let's see here. I'm trying to expose as much of the relevant area as I can. I mean, we had pretty good color penetration, and I should probably be able to like poke and move things around. Oof. This is it's so pretty, but yeah, we've got a lot more white left here. I think it depends on how well I push the colors through. And so I don't think that it should be a problem, and I will add color just as I did. The one thing that's going to mean that I need to wait And I'll do this round here on the stovetop with a yarn mop on the counter. There is a little bit of pink dye on my fingers. But anyway, the main reason why I need to wait is because I have to go pick up the kids from school, and so I will finish this up this evening after they are in bed. But the fact that the colors need so much time to really soak into the yarn means that having to add dye to the other side to process the other side is not a perk. And so I think that I like making this colorway more on the blanks. But we will reserve judgment for when we see all the dry or mostly dry yarn. Mainly we need to see the mops, because I think that's the direction I'm going to go, because that was my vision. And now that I've like looked at them for the beauty they are versus what was in my head, I am liking them a lot more. I don't mean that I didn't like them at all. I just meant that it was different from what I had in my head. And so then I was like, oh, well, maybe I should try something else that was in my head. But the technique that worked wonderfully on the blanks isn't working as well here because of the multiple layers of yarn, and that is the truth of it. And honestly, that's what I expected. And so I love this repeating neon colorway that we're creating here. It would just be a lot harder for me to scale this up in a way to dye 30 of them if I'm gonna have to do such a long cool and process in the pan. And so that's the only downside to that at this point. But anyway, I'm gonna go add color to the other side. It's dry powder time, so my respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves are back on. I started drying the yarn while it was cold and using my fingertips to help work the color through the layers. This way I wouldn't need to necessarily flip it again because we'll be able to get the coverage that we wanted the first time around, or really I guess second time around. And I'm adding a little bit less of the neon colors, not quite as much, but just a little bit of the powder in the respective spots. I did add more water with acid to increase that volume a little bit as I was adding the water. And I had my yarn mop off camera. This time it was one of the Sheila's Gold Zebra, and I pre-soaked in the same water that I had used before. And I steamed that yarn mop for 40 minutes in a steamer basket, let things cool, and then I washed the mop off camera and hung it up to dry. But we'll check in and wash this repeating rainbow colorway together. I am going to take the yarn out of our dye bath and sort of squeeze out the water back in. I do see a hint of pink in that water, but only a hint. And so fingers crossed when we start to wash this, this is delightful rainbow yarn. It would just be challenging to dye a larger amount of this without having multiple pans. If you had something like a proofing cabinet where you could set your colors up and let a lot of them heat set at once, then it wouldn't be so bad because you would have that long period of time. But since I'm more of a small batch dyer, I have to take those things into consideration. I'm now going to add some clear dish soap and fill the container up. And now we will see. I think I like the zebra a little bit more. I'm really enjoying the contrast with the stripes. And so the good news is that with soap, we are still seeing a hair of some color bleeding, but it's only a hair and nothing close to what we're seeing here and what we've seen some of these colors do in the past. So this is great. I'm going to go ahead and rinse this a few more times until the water is clear. If the water isn't clearing or the bleeding gets worse, I'll pop back in. But next, we're going to go look at the finished dry yarn. I went through a few different ideas and a few different yarn bases for the add-ons to the 2022 Spring Mini Skein mini series with the theme of painting rainbows. Too many ideas, too many bases. But let me walk you through again the different bases that we used. We dyed up our neon rainbow yarn mop on this non-superwash zebra base, a superwash nylon version of the zebra base in fingering weight, and a superwash version in DK. And then I also did a version of this on a sparkle lurex base. Our more traditional neon rainbow that I dyed low immersion,
on just 3 of the bases, all of the superwash ones. And the colors all pop beautifully, both on the 2 superwash zebra bases and our Lurex blend here. Between the Lurex blends, I prefer the more traditional variegated rainbow because I think that the silver in the Lurex competes with some of the randomness versus adding to it. Some of the smaller pops of color in here get a little bit lost because of the pops of silver, which look amazing when the colors are darker, but it does compete with smaller sections of color. I ultimately decided not to include this base as one of the add-ons and to focus more on the zebra versions. With the zebra bases, I don't feel like the black variegated twist competes with the colors as much as the Lurex did. And maybe that's because there are sections where the yarn is all white and then sections where this black comes in. So it adds a level of rainbowness and chaos that the 90s child in me really, really enjoys. Now don't get me wrong, I love the more variegated rainbow that we have on the right, but it would be a lot harder for me to dye up all of the bases that I need with that technique. And so when I need to dye what I think is ultimately going to be closer to 50 some bases, I need to make sure that it's a technique that I can scale a little bit. And I'm limited to maybe 6 to 10 of the other rainbow base a day. And with the amount of time that it took for the colors to fully absorb in the skeins on the right, it would be hard for me to scale it up in the quantities that I need for this series, while I'm also dyeing up more of the yarn that I needed for the sets themselves. So these are the 3 bases, and well, I've dyed a lot more of it now. Yep, I've dyed a whole lot more of them. It's fun how the colors vary from batch to batch when we're doing this. But now I gotta twist up all these babies. I love the way that the speckles spread out to give us these gradients of color. Gradients where there are going to be sections where things are more variegated because the sections aren't straight across. And so we'll have sections with pink and orange sort of going back and forth, and each one is a little bit unique, which is so much fun. All 3 of these blanks were dyed in one pan, but I just want to show one from another, I guess, round. And so there are similarities actually that looks pretty good. In some areas, like with the blue, there's a little bit more contrast with those speckles, but yeah, it's pretty similar. Now I do need to unravel, I think, 2 of these bases. And so now I'm going to show you what it looks like once we unravel it. And here is one of the sock blanks unraveled. The 2 50-gram skeins are perfectly matched. Yes, there might be a speckle on one and not the other, or something really subtle like that, but the areas where you have the blue and green variegated, and when the color transitions happen in the same place, which means that if you were to make 2 socks with this, they would be a matched pair. There is some modeling here, but it is very, very subtle. Because these fluorescent colors spread so much and strike on the slower side, there is dimension and tonal variation here, but you're not seeing the sharpest resist points. Where you are more likely to see some of the resist from the stitches come in is where we maybe have some blue and pink, and you can see some of the way the speckles spread, like there. The colors are beautiful and fun. I still think that maybe you'd want to put the pink down here just because it isn't the most purple, or maybe mix your own sort of neon feeling purple by adding a little bit of blue to the purple pop, but I still love it. So why dye double-stranded sock blanks or mini skeins? What makes one of them more useful than the other? And ultimately, it comes down to how much control you want over your color transitions. On the sock blank, the transitions are going to blend a little bit because the colors blend throughout the blank. But there's also a bit of randomness in there, which is really, really fun. when you have 6 semi-solid colors, you can choose to blend them together by alternating rounds, but you have a little bit more control over how long or short you want each color section to be. So there may be some circumstances where you would prefer to use mini skeins for a project, and other circumstances where you may want to blank and not have to deal with loose ends. And that ultimately comes down to preference. But if you had mini skeins and say you wanted the orange section to be shorter, that's really easy to do. You just swap to the other color. Whereas on a sock blank, because it's more of a gradient overall, you would have to snip it to create that orange section a little bit shorter. But anyway, I love how bright these colors are. It is so, so, so fun. Now there is some crimp because it is an unraveled sock blank. So once I finish up filming, I am gonna go just soak it in some plain water for 15 minutes or so, give it a little snap and hang it up to dry to help that crimp relax a little bit. Now as for the black light, you can see that the yellows and greens are glowing the most. That's what we're used to. The blue isn't glowing at all, and the pink and orange are glowing some. I don't know, I just love seeing the fluorescence. It makes me really, really happy. Hopefully this whole series this year has shown that there's so many different ways you can play with rainbow colorways. You know, whether you're dyeing gradients, sets, single skeins, there's a lot of different options. And clearly there's still more that I could do. Normally I would break up all the different bonus colorways into more than one video. But today it did kind of work to include it all in one. I just hope that this video isn't like 3 hours long. And here are a bunch of the yarn mops. And we have a fair amount of variation of the color in them. There's something almost bird-like about the colorway. I adore it on the DK weight yarn because since the 2-ply is thicker here than on the fingering weight, it adds a more graphic quality. The black in the spirals is spread out a little bit more than it is in the fingering weight. There's too much yarn to move to my closet, but we can turn on our black light and take a little look. In the mops, when I turn on the black light, you just see the glow of mostly the yellow and the green. Oh, it is so fun. It feels very like paint splattery. I really, really like it. If you got one of the add-on skeins, I really hope you liked it. I wanted something that felt very different and unique compared to all of the different colorways I created in the mini skein sets. And well, this base is so fun, and I think it helps do the work of helping something feel very different already. But I am very excited to play with one of these myself. I just adore how it all turned out. I cannot guarantee that I have any more add-ons available. It has likely sold out. But these bonus skeins should now be available in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. And so if you're interested in bringing one of them home, I wouldn't wait too long because now that I've said they're there, they're probably going to go pretty quickly. You can find a link to my shop down in the video description. I am not immune to having doubts, and I definitely had some doubts along the way. But I adore how this colorway came out so much that I actually kept a fingering and DK weight skein for myself. I don't know what I'm going to make with them yet, but I wanted to have some. I kept a lot of yarn from this series in general. Which one of the colorways tonight was your favorite? I still want to try doing a yarn mop version using the dyes mixed with citric acid on the zebra base. I think that that would be really fun and give a like overall softer amount of fluorescence than what we did with the direct dry powders here in this video. Please make sure you're subscribed to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel. I don't always post videos every night like I am this week, but I do post at least twice a week, and we have special series and live streams along the way, and it's so much fun. There is still one more video for the Spring Mini Skein mini-series, a little vlog where I'll take you behind the scenes to see everything that went into creating these colorways and videos. I haven't edited it yet, so we'll see how much footage there is. If you love the content here and want to support the channel, there are many ways you can do that. I have my Etsy shop, which is filled with hand-dyed yarn, and I've been restocking it almost every night of the series with extras, and so you'll find links to that and everything else I'm about to mention in the description. I do have a Patreon, which has a lot of really fun perks, and you can now become a channel member to get some loyalty badges and custom emotes that you can use in your comments and in live chats. And I think I maybe mentioned this last night, but there are a lot of other rainbow ideas that I had for this series that I have not done yet. And so I'm really excited to play around more with creating my own types of rainbow colorways. And, well, I hope you'll enjoy that too. Of course, we do have some non-rainbow content coming up on the channel as well, but I just love being able to play with color, and thank you so much for supporting this journey. And I know that for every video I film, I'm learning so much more, and so I hope that these videos are helpful for you as well. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and thank you so much for watching.